The move. No one was supposed to notice. For decades, the Horn of Africa has existed on the periphery of global strategic thinking, often overshadowed by more immediate geopolitical crises in the Middle East, East Asia, or Europe. Yet, within this region, the fragile state of Somalia has remained a puzzle for analysts and foreign powers alike. Born out of colonial legacies and decades of civil war, Somalia's borders are internationally recognized, but in practice, much of the country has operated under weak central authority, fragile governance, and local clan-based structures. Among these fractured territories, one region stands out: Somaliland. Officially part of Somalia on paper, Somaliland has operated as a de facto independent state since 1991. It has its own government, currency, and security forces, and has been remarkably stable compared to the chaos that has engulfed southern Somalia over the years. Yet despite its stability, Somaliland has remained largely unrecognized by the international community, a status that its leaders have quietly sought to change for decades. Recognition is not merely symbolic, it is the key that unlocks formal diplomatic relations, international trade, and strategic legitimacy. In this context, recent developments involving Israel have the potential to drastically alter the balance of power in East Africa, raising the question: is there a quiet, calculated plan to fragment Somalia entirely? And if so, what are the consequences? Israel's growing involvement with Somaliland is subtle yet profound. While no public announcement has been made about formal recognition, intelligence cooperation, or diplomatic accords, multiple sources indicate that Israel has been quietly engaging with Somaliland's leadership. The motivations are clear, even if the strategies are not widely discussed. For Israel, Somaliland represents a rare opportunity. A small but strategically located region near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, one of the world's most crucial maritime choke points. This narrow passage, situated between Djibouti, Eritrea, and Yemen, controls the flow of oil, goods, and resources from the Middle East to Africa, Europe, and Asia. Any power with influence in Somaliland gains a foothold in this vital corridor, and by extension, leverage over regional and global shipping routes. Control, influence, and proximity to key maritime networks are all elements that Israel has historically sought in regions that intersect with broader Middle Eastern security concerns. And Somaliland, with its unrecognized status, provides a rare, relatively low-risk arena to establish such influence. The significance of this silent engagement cannot be overstated. On the surface, Israel's involvement could be framed as humanitarian, economic, or technical support. But in reality, every small step, whether it is intelligence sharing, port development, security training, or diplomatic gestures, has the potential to incrementally weaken Somalia's central government. Mogadishu, already struggling to assert authority over its entire territory, faces an existential threat if Somaliland begins to receive backing from a state with global influence. Recognition, even partial or indirect, has a powerful symbolic weight that can embolden Somaliland's leadership and encourage other international actors to reconsider their stance. It is the kind of quiet, strategic maneuver that has reshaped geopolitical landscapes in other parts of the world, often without the general public ever realizing it until the consequences are irreversible. Somalia's vulnerability in this scenario is multilayered. The country has endured decades of civil conflict, foreign interventions, and internal political fragmentation. Clan politics dominate local governance, while the federal government in Mogadishu struggles to implement policies or secure allegiance from various regions. This systemic weakness has long made Somalia susceptible to foreign influence, whether through economic incentives, diplomatic pressure, or covert operations. Somaliland's push for recognition taps directly into this weakness. By cultivating external partnerships, Somaliland's leaders can bypass Mogadishu entirely, effectively sidelining the federal government and undermining its authority. It is a classic divide and conquer approach, applied not through military conquest, but through the subtler mechanisms of legitimacy, recognition, and international engagement. The stakes for Somalia extend far beyond territorial integrity. Every move towards recognition of Somaliland destabilizes not only the Somali state, but also the wider region. Neighboring countries like Ethiopia, Djibouti, and Kenya watch developments closely, as the fragmentation of Somalia could have spillover effects on border security, refugee flows, and regional trade networks. Similarly, Islamist militant groups and organized crime networks, which thrive in environments where state control is weak, may find opportunities to exploit political instability, further eroding security and governance. Israel's involvement, seemingly a distant concern for global audiences, intersects with these local dynamics in ways that could alter the trajectory of the entire Horn of Africa for decades. Israel's strategic calculus appears to be multifaceted. First, there is the geopolitical consideration of expanding influence in the Red Sea region. By establishing ties with Somaliland, Israel positions itself near shipping lanes crucial for global energy and trade flows, while simultaneously gaining intelligence and security advantages. Second, there's the symbolic impact. demonstrating the ability to influence territorial recognition challenges long-standing international norms and sends a message to other states that borders are not immutable. Third, Israel's quiet engagement avoids overt confrontation with Somalia or other regional powers, allowing the strategy to unfold in stealth while resistance is minimal. This combination of opportunity, timing, and subtlety exemplifies modern geopolitical maneuvering, where influence is exerted not through armies but through networks, recognition, and quiet partnerships. The silent nature of this plan is its greatest strength. Unlike overt interventions that provoke international backlash, covert or semi-covert strategies allow the actors involved to shape realities without immediate accountability. Recognition, diplomatic engagement, and security cooperation can gradually shift the balance of power, creating irreversible changes over time. For Somalia, this means that a region that was once under its effective control could slowly drift into semi-autonomy with the backing of a foreign power. The effect is destabilizing, not through violence, but through legitimacy, the most powerful form of influence in modern geopolitics. This quiet reconfiguration also carries long-term strategic consequences. For Somalia, losing Somaliland in practice, if not formally on paper, diminishes its ability to negotiate in regional and international forums. For neighboring states and global powers, it signals that territorial integrity can be influenced by external partnerships, potentially encouraging similar movements elsewhere. And for the international community, it raises profound questions about the principles of sovereignty, recognition, and intervention in the 21st century. The world may not notice these shifts immediately, but the effects will accumulate, creating a new status quo that few predicted and fewer fully understand. In essence, Israel's engagement with Somaliland is not just about a small, unrecognized region in East Africa. It is about demonstrating the ability to subtly influence state legitimacy, control strategic choke points, and reshape regional power dynamics without firing a single shot. It is a modern blueprint for fragmentation, silent, calculated, and effective. Somalia stands at a crossroads, with its future unity hanging in the balance. The consequences of these quiet maneuvers are enormous, and yet, for now, they remain largely invisible to the global public. Why Somalia is the real target. While the world focuses on headlines about Israel, Somaliland, or sporadic conflicts in the Horn of Africa, the central story remains Somalia itself, a country whose fragile unity has been under siege for decades. The federal government in Mogadishu is acutely aware of the stakes. Any foreign engagement with Somaliland that bypasses the central government is not just a diplomatic slight. It is a direct threat to Somalia's territorial integrity. To understand the gravity of the situation, one must grasp the deep historical, political, and strategic layers that make Somalia uniquely vulnerable to this type of intervention. Somalia's federal structure is inherently decentralized, designed to accommodate clan-based governance and regional autonomy. While this system has worked to some degree in preventing total collapse, it has also created openings for external actors to influence regions independently. Somaliland, having maintained stability and relative prosperity compared to southern Somalia, has become a magnet for foreign powers looking to expand influence without engaging directly with Mogadishu. The irony is stark. The more Somalia struggles to assert authority over its territory, the more attractive its breakaway regions become to strategic partners. Israel's involvement, subtle and quiet as it may be, exploits precisely this weakness. The recognition, or even the appearance of recognition, of Somaliland by a foreign power has a psychological impact that goes beyond borders. Legitimacy, in the modern geopolitical context, is often more powerful than military force. When an influential state signals that a breakaway region is worthy of engagement, it shifts perceptions at every level, within the local population, among regional neighbors, and across the international community. Somaliland's leaders understand this implicitly, and Israel's tacit support magnifies it. Each port project, security cooperation agreement, or intelligence sharing arrangement may seem a minor individually, but cumulatively, they chip away at the authority of Somalia's central government. In practical terms, this means that Mogadishu is not only losing control over Somaliland, but also losing credibility both domestically and internationally. The fragility of Somalia's central government is compounded by regional politics. Neighboring countries, Ethiopia, Kenya, Djibouti, and even Eritrea, closely monitor developments in Somalia. They have vested interests in the stability or fragmentation of their neighbor. A weakened Somalia emboldens external actors to pursue agendas that further undermine federal authority, whether through economic leverage, military presence, or strategic partnerships. Israel's quiet engagement with Somaliland, while not overtly confrontational, acts as a catalyst for these regional calculations. It sends a signal: borders are malleable, and the balance of power can shift without open conflict. Fragmentation as a strategy is not a new concept in global geopolitics. History is filled with examples where major powers exploited divisions within weaker states to secure strategic gains. What makes the Somaliland case particularly modern is the use of diplomacy, recognition, and intelligence as tools of influence. Unlike traditional colonization or occupation, this method does not require armies, battles, or overt confrontation. Instead, it leverages legal, economic, and political instruments to gradually alter realities on the ground. The goal is clear: weaken the federal authority to the point where the central government cannot contest the breakaway region's trajectory, effectively fragmenting the state without a war. Somalia's federal government faces additional challenges in countering this silent strategy. Domestic politics are a labyrinth of competing clans, party allegiances, and regional loyalties. Every move by Mogadishu to assert authority over Somaliland risks internal backlash. Foreign intervention complicates matters further. If Somalia attempts to publicly confront Israel or Somaliland, it risks alienating other allies, provoking international criticism, and creating instability that can be exploited by extremist groups. In effect, the federal government is trapped in a strategic vice: act and risk chaos, do nothing and watch sovereignty erode. The consequences of fragmentation extend beyond political symbolism. Somalia, RES coastlines and ports are critical not only for national trade, but also for global maritime security. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait, adjacent to Somaliland, is a corridor through which a significant portion of the world's oil, grain, and trade passes. A semi-independent Somaliland with foreign backing could control, influence, or monitor these routes, creating leverage over regional and global commerce. For Israel, and potentially other foreign actors, this access provides both strategic and economic opportunities. For Somalia, losing control over these vital assets represents a profound loss of both sovereignty and bargaining power in regional and international forums. There's also a demographic and social dimension to consider. Somaliland's population, though small compared to the rest of Somalia, has experienced relative stability and development. Citizens enjoy a degree of safety, governance, and economic activity not seen elsewhere in Somalia. The lure of recognition and foreign partnership strengthens the local leadership's position, allowing them to consolidate power internally while diminishing the appeal of a unified Somali state. Over time, even ordinary citizens may see alignment with external partners as a pragmatic choice, further eroding national cohesion. Another critical factor is the potential precedent this sets for other regions in Africa. Recognition of Somaliland, even in a limited form, challenges long-standing norms about state sovereignty and territorial integrity. Other regions with separatist ambitions may take note, emboldening movements in Ethiopia, Sudan, or elsewhere on the continent. In this sense, Somalia is not only the immediate target, but also a case study in modern fragmentation strategies. The methods being employed, quiet partnerships, incremental recognition, strategic investment, illustrate a blueprint that could be replicated in other fragile states with long-term global consequences. Somalia's challenge is further compounded by external geopolitical rivalries. While Israel may see Somaliland primarily through the lens of strategic access and influence, other powers, Turkey, the UAE, China, and the United States, also have stakes in the region. This creates a complex web of alliances and counter-alliances, where every move must be calculated and every signal carefully interpreted. In such a context, the federal government is not only combating fragmentation, but also navigating a diplomatic minefield where missteps can be costly. The silent, calculated nature of Israel's strategy highlights a modern lesson in geopolitics. The most effective moves are often invisible, slow, and deliberate. Military force is no longer the only path to influence. Recognition, legitimacy, and strategic partnerships can achieve similar or greater results with less immediate risk. For Somalia, the threat is existential precisely because it is so quiet. The erosion of authority, influence, and sovereignty may occur gradually, but once the shift is complete, reversing it could be impossible. The country that has struggled to maintain unity for decades now faces a challenge that is as much psychological as it is political. Finally, understanding the full scope of this silent strategy requires a shift in perspective. This is not merely about Israel or Somaliland, it is about the nature of modern statecraft. Weak states, fragile governments, and unrecognized regions can become chess pieces in broader geopolitical games, where influence is exerted through subtle, incremental measures rather than open conflict. Somalia, in this case, represents both a target and a lesson. The most dangerous interventions are not those fought with weapons, but those waged with diplomacy, recognition, and the quiet power of legitimacy. The Horn of Africa power game. The Horn of Africa has long been considered a strategic backwater, a region whose significance was largely overlooked by the global powers preoccupied with the Middle East or Asia. Yet today, it has emerged as one of the most contested geopolitical theaters in the world. Somalia, with its fragile federal structure, its unrecognized breakaway region of Somaliland, and its proximity to some of the world's busiest maritime routes, sits at the center of a growing struggle for influence. The region's geostrategic importance is magnified by the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which funnels critical maritime traffic from the Red Sea into the Gulf of Aden, connecting Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Any power with influence in Somaliland effectively gains leverage over this maritime artery, providing the ability to monitor, control, or even disrupt trade routes that support global commerce. Israel's engagement with Somaliland is not occurring in isolation. The United Arab Emirates, Turkey, China, and the United States all maintain stakes in the Horn of Africa. Each seeks to secure influence, access to ports, and strategic partnerships, yet their objectives do not always align. In this competitive environment, even subtle shifts can have cascading consequences. Israel's quiet moves, whether through intelligence cooperation, security assistance, or the symbolic gestures of recognition, play into this intricate web of regional power dynamics. By aligning, even informally, with Somaliland, Israel is effectively inserting itself into a theater dominated by multiple global actors, using minimal overt confrontation to achieve maximum strategic positioning. The implications for Somalia are profound. If Somaliland gains even limited recognition or support from a major power, it sets off a chain reaction that weakens the federal government's influence, isolates Mogadishu diplomatically, and encourages other nations to recalibrate their relationships with Somalia's territories. Ethiopia, for example, may deepen its engagement with Somaliland to secure port access, bypassing Somalia entirely. Gulf states, who have historically invested in port infrastructure and local political actors, might hedge their bets, investing further in Somaliland to gain a foothold near vital shipping lanes. Over time, Somalia could find itself marginalized, unable to assert sovereignty over its territories or negotiate effectively in regional forums. This is the essence of modern fragmentation. Strategic influence is exerted quietly through recognition, partnerships, and economic leverage, rather than through traditional military intervention. Beyond the diplomatic and economic layers, there's a security dimension that cannot be ignored. Somalia has long struggled with extremist groups. Fragmentation of the Somali state amplifies these vulnerabilities. A semi-autonomous Somaliland, aligned with foreign powers, would not only diminish Mogadishu's capacity to govern effectively, but could also unintentionally create power vacuums that extremist organizations exploit. In addition, the Red Sea corridor's security could be affected if tensions escalate between regional actors. Israel, aware of these risks, is likely calculating that the strategic advantages outweigh the potential destabilization, betting that the benefits of influence and control will ultimately solidify its position in the Horn of Africa. The economic stakes in Somaliland are equally significant. The region has long been involved in port development and trade facilitation, attracting foreign investment and creating economic hubs that function independently of Somalia. Control over these ports is not merely about commerce, it is about strategic leverage. For global powers, access to Somaliland's ports offers a direct pipeline to the Red Sea, bypassing the bureaucratic and unstable channels of Mogadishu. Israel's involvement in these economic projects, whether through investment, technical assistance, or advisory roles, embeds it deeply into the region's infrastructure, creating influence that cannot be easily reversed. In essence, Somaliland is being positioned as both a political and economic springboard for external powers to project influence across the Horn of Africa and beyond. Regional reactions are also a crucial factor. Neighboring countries are highly attuned to the Horn's evolving power dynamics. Ethiopia, for instance, has its own strategic interests in ensuring access to ports and mitigating instability along its borders. Kenya monitors developments closely, as instability or separatism in Somalia could affect its security and trade routes. Djibouti, hosting critical military bases for several global powers, has a vested interest in maintaining a balance that ensures continued foreign presence without triggering conflict. Eritrea and Sudan, too, watch with keen interest, aware that shifts in Somalia's internal dynamics could provide opportunities to extend influence or advance territorial claims. In this highly interconnected environment, even subtle changes, like Israel's quiet engagement with Somaliland, reverberate across multiple capitals, influencing policies and alliances in ways that are not immediately visible to the global public. The social dimension within Somaliland and Somalia also contributes to the unfolding power game. Somaliland's population, relatively more stable and secure than other parts of Somalia, increasingly sees alignment with external powers as pragmatic. Legitimacy and recognition provide not only political validation, but also economic and security benefits, reinforcing the leadership's position domestically. Conversely, citizens in southern Somalia witness the slow erosion of federal authority, fueling skepticism about Mogadishu's capacity to govern effectively. Over time, these perceptions become self-reinforcing, creating a societal environment where fragmentation is accepted, if not expected. Modern geopolitics often hinges on perception as much as on reality, and in this case, Israel. As engagement with Somaliland is as much about shaping perceptions as it is about concrete strategic gains, the long-term consequences of these moves extend well beyond Somalia's borders. Recognition of Somaliland, even limited or implicit, challenges international norms surrounding state sovereignty and territorial integrity. If successful, it could set a precedent for other separatist movements in Africa, from the Tigray region in Ethiopia to factions in Sudan and beyond. The international community faces a dilemma: acknowledge the strategic reality on the ground, or uphold principles that may no longer align with contemporary power dynamics. Israel's strategy demonstrates that influence in the modern era is often exerted quietly through legitimacy, partnerships, and recognition, rather than through overt force, a lesson with global applicability for fragile states everywhere. Perhaps most importantly, the Horn of Africa power game illustrates how small, calculated interventions can have disproportionate impacts. A seemingly minor diplomatic engagement or technical partnership can trigger cascading effects, reshaping regional alliances, economic networks, and security dynamics. Israel's involvement in Somaliland, while quiet, is emblematic of a broader pattern in contemporary geopolitics: silent, deliberate moves that change realities without attracting headlines. The consequences of these maneuvers will accumulate slowly, yet steadily, creating irreversible shifts that reshape not just Somalia, but the entire region. As Part 3 draws to a close, it is essential to recognize the delicate balance at play. Somaliland is not merely a pawn, it is a strategic pivot. Somalia is not merely a weak state, it is a test case for modern geopolitical fragmentation. Israel is not merely an external actor, it is a strategist employing subtle, deliberate moves to achieve maximum influence. And the world, largely unaware, watches as a quiet but decisive power struggle unfolds in one of the planet OES most strategically important regions. The Horn of Africa, once considered peripheral, is now at the center of a silent contest with implications that could resonate far beyond its borders. The endgame: no one is discussing. The most dangerous strategies are often the quietest, unfolding not in public battles or headlines, but in whispered agreements, strategic partnerships, and incremental steps that slowly reshape realities on the ground. Israel's engagement with Somaliland exemplifies this modern approach to geopolitical influence. By establishing relationships, whether diplomatic, economic, or security-focused, Israel is positioning itself in a location of immense strategic importance without firing a single shot. This silent maneuvering carries implications that extend far beyond the Horn of Africa, redefining how states can assert influence over fragile nations in the 21st century. For Somalia, the threat is existential. The federal government, already stretched thin and hampered by internal divisions, faces the risk of losing authority over its northern territory completely. Every port project, security partnership, or diplomatic signal involving Somaliland chips away at Mogadishu's legitimacy, slowly normalizing the idea that the central government may not control the entirety of its claimed territory. The implications are not just political, they are economic, social, and security related. Ports that once answered to Mogadishu now operate with degrees of autonomy, potentially under the influence of foreign actors. Trade routes, crucial to both regional stability and global commerce, become arenas of indirect control. And the message this sends to other separatist movements across Africa is clear. Fragmentation can succeed when carefully orchestrated and quietly supported. The ripple effects of this process are profound. In addition to weakening Somalia, Israel's strategy indirectly reshapes the calculations of neighboring countries. Ethiopia, Djibouti, and Kenya, all highly attuned to shifts in power and control in the Horn of Africa, must adjust their policies in response to emerging realities. Foreign powers operating in the region, from Turkey to the UAE, observe and calibrate their strategies, seeking opportunities or protections in anticipation of change. The delicate balance that has historically maintained relative stability in the region becomes increasingly precarious. A single, silent engagement in Somaliland has the potential to cascade into a regional realignment, creating long-term consequences for political alliances, economic networks, and security arrangements. Somaliland itself becomes both a beneficiary and an instrument in this game. For its leadership, engagement with a recognized global actor provides legitimacy, resources, and leverage against Mogadishu. For Israel, Somaliland is a strategic pivot, a forward position that grants access to one of the world's most critical maritime corridors. The local population, while largely unaware of the full scope of these machinations, experiences the subtle effects: improved infrastructure, security initiatives, and economic opportunities. Yet these gains come at a price. The very independence they are being encouraged to embrace, or at least negotiate for, fuels broader fragmentation and insecurity across Somalia. The tension between local prosperity and national disunity highlights the complex, often paradoxical nature of modern geopolitical strategy. Strategically, this is a lesson in patience and subtlety. Traditional military interventions are costly, unpredictable, and internationally scrutinized. By contrast, the approach being employed in Somaliland relies on legitimacy, quiet partnerships, and incremental shifts in authority. Recognition, partial or indirect, functions as a lever, gradually redefining political realities without triggering immediate backlash. It is an elegant, if dangerous, form of modern influence, a blueprint for fragmentation in fragile states that prioritizes slow, deliberate erosion of centralized control over overt confrontation. The humanitarian dimension of this quiet strategy should not be overlooked. While headlines often highlight violence, famine, or displacement, the silent reconfiguration of power structures has profound social consequences. Communities in Somalia may find themselves caught between competing authorities, foreign actors, and local leadership, each pursuing different agendas. For ordinary citizens, these changes may manifest as uncertainty, reduced access to services, or the perception that their government no longer represents or protects them fully. The slow pace of these shifts can lull observers into a false sense of stability, masking the underlying forces that are reshaping the country in ways that will last for decades. The broader geopolitical lesson is equally striking. Modern statecraft is increasingly about shaping perceptions, controlling narratives, and quietly shifting legitimacy. Israel's Somaliland strategy demonstrates that influence does not require overt domination. It requires patience, precision, and the ability to leverage structural weaknesses in targeted states. By carefully navigating alliances, selectively engaging with regional actors, and operating below the threshold of international scrutiny, this redefines what it means to wield power in the modern era, where recognition and quiet partnerships can be as consequential as armies and weapons. As the pieces of this puzzle come together, the pattern becomes unmistakable. Somalia, already fragile, faces a deliberate campaign of fragmentation. Somaliland, with Israel's silent backing, emerges not merely as a breakaway territory, but as a strategic actor in its own right, capable of influencing regional trade, security, and politics. The international community, largely unaware or unwilling to confront these changes, becomes a passive observer as reality on the ground shifts. Borders, sovereignty, and authority, long considered fixed, become malleable, shaped by strategic interests and incremental interventions that are almost invisible until the consequences are undeniable. In conclusion, the story of Israel's engagement with Somaliland is not just about one country or one region. It is a window into the mechanics of modern geopolitics, where quiet strategy, calculated partnerships, and incremental legitimacy can achieve what traditional power often cannot. Somalia's struggle, the Horn of Africa's fragility, and the shifting influence of global powers all converge in this silent contest, demonstrating that the battles of the 21st century are often fought not with armies, but with recognition, strategy, and patience. For viewers who want to understand the hidden forces shaping our world, the lesson is clear. The most significant changes are often the ones no one talks about, unfolding quietly until reversal becomes impossible. If you found this deep dive insightful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an expose on the hidden strategies shaping our world. The silent wars of influence are already underway, and understanding them is the first step to staying informed.